All right, let's get into this real quick. I do not know why crickets are playing. Let me get rid of the crickets. Nope, there's something wrong with these buttons. Anyway, the show is going to begin with this adorable little old lady. She's so cute, so nice, she seems like such a nice old lady. She ran this beautiful little place where basically elderly individuals, retired, disabled, would go and essentially live out their final days. Unfortunately, their final days came as a very negative way under our little lovely lady who basically had a habit. It's so the point is they would essentially end up in the backyard. And I want to go ahead and explain to you why this is super relevant as to our lovely little lady, because a lot of disabled individuals end up in places where ultimately they, don't have the best protections. And I just want to do this video because I hope it will bring a certain amount of knowledge, understanding to living facilities that can turn really negative rather quickly when they go ahead and bury people in the backyard. And I really hope, just to be clear, just so that everything's fair with this thing, that if you have an elderly person, that you start to work out the plans for who's going to take care of them when medically they can't be at home. And that's the whole point of this thing. What do you do when somebody becomes disabled and they can't stay at home? What do you do when somebody becomes retired and they can't stay at home? That's the main focus of the video. That's the main purpose of talking about this. But again, there's this lovely lady who is an absolute monster. Her name was Dorothy Puente. Okay. She was born January 9th, 1929. March 27th, 2011 is kind of when things ended for her. As you know, she is a fan of using shovels. She used shovels along with medications, drugs to go ahead and, do some very horrible things. Let's go through it real quick. She was an American serial killer, pretty famous one. She probably is one of the most famous ones for directly interacting with and abusing and murdering Social Security recipients. She had a boarding house, Sacramento, California. And I know what you're going to say about California. I'm just going to skip right over that one. It was in the 1980s. And what happened was she had this boarding house. It was registered. It was correct. It was legitimate. It was for mentally ill, disabled, people who had physical impairments, mental impairments, retired, etc. And then what happened is basically she went ahead and would receive their benefit checks, cash them and use them for the upkeep of the facility. However, the problem is she had a habit of murdering Social Security recipients by overdosing them with drugs and then basically, handling things from there. So she could continue to go ahead and collect the money. And so what happened is, at some point there was a problem where somebody said, a caseworker, hey, where is so-and-so? And they sent the police over. So let's just get some of the basics here with this. 1982, 1988, Puente took in dozens of tenants into her Victorian home at 1426 F Street. They began disappearing. She claimed that they moved away or died naturally. November 11th, 1988, police visited the house. There was a tenant, an Alvaro Bert Montoya, developmentally disabled man. His social worker said, hey, have you seen Alvaro? Do you know where he is, right? And the police were basically on the property. They had a tip that basically Dorothy Puente was drugging them, killing them, and burying them in the backyard. And basically robbing them of their stuff that they had and then robbing their Social Security benefits going forward. So what do the police do? They go through the garbage. They find some blood-stained items. They go into the backyard. They dig it up. And lo and behold, they find bodies. There was Everson Gilmuth, 77. There was Ruth Monroe, 61. Leona Carpenter, 78. Alvaro Montoya, 51, which is the one that caused the investigation. There was Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, was only 55, by the way. James Gallup, 62. Vera Faye Martin, 64. And Betty Palmer, 78. Just so you guys understand, most of them, pretty much all of them were buried in the backyard. So it's just one of those sorts of gigs. And they found a flathead shovel, which is kind of interesting because that's a lot of digging with a flathead shovel. That's the square head. as opposed to the round head shovel. You know what I mean? It's just, it's tough to dig with a flat head shovel. Unless you wanted to do like really nice. Anyway, we're off topic. So the point is, this whole situation is a video to explain to people why you need to watch out for your disabled and elderly, because receiving that check is very paramount to facilities. Now, while you're probably not going to see current facilities having a cute little old lady with a Victorian style house taking in disabled and retired, who ultimately did some bad things, who used a shovel. Again, it's a square nose. It's just, you don't normally dig holes like that unless you're trying to make them really square on the edges. It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, a lot of them are not going to have wonderful individuals that were absolutely horrific and terrible like this. But I will say this, you need to watch out for overdoses. One of the main things that I hear about when it comes to individuals who end up in one of those facilities is that there was a medication accident. And so, the big thing that you have to keep in mind is that most medications that you take are no biggie, right? They're not a huge ordeal. But if you double or triple the amount that you take or the amount that's in the food, it can cause somebody to become terminal. It can cause some really big problems. It can cause somebody to have issues that will ultimately equate to passing away. So the point of this video, along with Sweetie bitching and complaining in the background, and now she's coming over to complain at me, is that basically you need to be careful with where you send people. And if possible, you need to find a way to make sure that you have a good understanding as to what's going on with them. So here's the thing. Technologies, when you send a disabled person or retired person to a home, technologies that will see how that person is doing consistently. So like those Apple Watches that have basically the ability to read certain medical items. Sweetie, come here. So the idea is that those items will go ahead and help with discovery, trying to figure out how they're doing, what's going on. Sweetie, no. She's just a whiner today. Come here. So the whole point is this. No, sweetie. No. Come here. You be nice. So the whole idea is basically this, okay? At the end of the day, there's certain items that I want you to consider. There's items that basically track movement. There's items that track health abilities, what's going on with the cardiovascular system. There's items that basically track thoughts now, where you put them on your head and basically they know what's going on with the person, if they're stressed, if something's happening. There's other stuff too. There's, special little spy cameras on Amazon, stuff like that. There's all kinds of stuff. Even the CIA operatives that work with the CIA say that a lot of the stuff that they used comes from Amazon, and then they just integrate it into other stuff, such as, for example, taking a regular briefcase, taking all of the stitching out of it, and then sewing these devices from Amazon into them, which is just absolutely amazing. Now, with that said, you want to go ahead and be able to know what this person is up to, have direct contact with them, because what a lot of these facilities do is they cut off your ability to go ahead and communicate with them. So for example, things like ability to text the person, ability to call the person directly, a lot of that stuff gets cut off. So you have to kind of pre-plan what technologies you're going to have available so that at the end of the day, you can get in direct contact with that person. And I can see I put the sign on the wrong side, but whatever, that's okay. I'll fix it for the next one. Point is this, at the end of the day, you really want to make sure that you have an understanding as to what that facility is about. Most of these facilities are quite well funded with all the checks that they receive from individuals, and they're using Medicare and Medicaid to pay for a lot of their services. So, when they're telling you, oh, this facility can't afford this, or oh, it's so expensive, yada, yada, it's really not. They're getting mass payments from Medicaid and Medicare for the functions that they're doing. That's how they work. That's why they're so profitable. That's why those elderly care facilities have become such cash cows. So I just wanted to go ahead and let you know, basically she was charged, this individual, with 9 counts of murder in 1989, 1993 trial in Monterey County, basically last 6 months, one of the longest and most expensive trials in California history at the time. She was convicted on 3 counts, Montoya, Fink, and Gallup. The jury deadlocked on the other 6. Sentenced to life without parole, died of natural causes in prison in Chowchilla, California on March 27, 2011 at age 82. So the point is, I just need you to understand and focus on making sure that when you go ahead, if you go ahead and have somebody who is disabled and or elderly that has to go into a special care facility or a special care home, You do not want to lose total communication with them because bad things happen to them. And it's usually from people that look very unsuspecting. And it's not always the boss. Sometimes it's an underling who's doing something to basically harm that individual. So if you have had somebody that you have loved that's passed away in one of these facilities, and their passing away seemed very odd, which a lot of people I talk to, it does, then remember, was there a lack of communication? Was there a lack of extra testing? And that's another thing too. They have all these new blood tests that you can go ahead and do very easily with the person to figure out if something's in their system that shouldn't be in their system. So it's just a different world than it used to be. Back in the day, they would go into this facility and like you really couldn't get a hold of them and stuff like that. Now there's all these technologies, all these specialty cameras, that are cellular, all that kinds of stuff that will allow you to know what's going on as a result of that facility. And you'll notice that when the person enters those facilities, they will usually make you sign this mega contract about limiting your ability to film, limiting your ability to have access to this, or limiting your ability to do this with that person. I understand that, some of these facilities have that, but you also need to protect the individual that you are trying to make sure has the best medical situation that they can. So just be aware, this is something you should know. I'm not saying people for these facilities are going to get buried in the back, although they clearly historically, especially for disabled and retired, have. So that is a problem that we just need to watch out for. All right. Anyways, I'm going to catch you guys at the next video shortly. Attorney Walter Hnot, Disability Resolution PA. Hope all is well. I will catch you at the next video in about 10 minutes where we're going to talk about a person who likely has potentially robbed you. And it's a guy, a Nigerian, who was a master criminal, a master theft of Social Security numbers. And he recently, as part of the Nigerian crime ring, has been essentially arrested. So it's kind of sad because we're seeing a lot of Somali, Nigerian, African-based, and some South American crime rings that are happening that OIG, the Office of Inspector General, is catching, and basically, they're setting up the hearings, doing the trials, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, the amount of fraud we have in this country is rampant. And unfortunately, it looks like it's starting to get clamped down on aggressively. And it looks like OIG has had a lot of help from the federal government to find these individuals, prosecute these individuals. But the amount of damage that they've done is absolutely mind-boggling. And I'm going to go through essentially the person who likely stole from you so that you understand exactly what's going on. It's one of these things where he stole from so many people. It was just absolutely incredible. All right, I will catch you later at the next video. Attorney Walter Hnot, the most viewed, subscribed to, and clicked on Disability Attorney in America. My apologies for not going live last night. I was working away on the house up here because I'm up in New Jersey at the horse estate. And bottom line is, it's just so cold and I get tired. Like once it's like 1 a.m., I'm just too tired to go live. But I'll catch you a little bit later, and I'll see you at the next video shortly. Thank you so much. Attorney Walter Hnot. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.